President Trump and I began Sunday morning the same way, tweeting. At 7:50 a.m., the president tweeted, "Putin and I discussed forming an impenetrable cybersecurity unit so that election hacking and many other negative things will be guarded." As soon as I saw that at 8:08 a.m., I tweeted, "Will it be called the collusion unit?" And 6 minutes after that, I tweeted, "Who will introduce a bill in Congress to stop this? Will the vote be unanimous? Why not?" And an hour after that, I got an answer from Democratic Congressman Brendan Boyle saying, "POTUS defies common sense. This week I will introduce a bill that would ban any joint effort with Russia on cybersecurity." Joining us now, Democratic Congressman Brendan Boyle introduced that legislation today that would block the funding of cybersecurity unit with Russia. Also with us, Evelyn Farkas, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council and a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense. Congressman Boyle, thank you very much for answering my tweet so quickly yesterday. And I got to say, when I was working in the Senate, if we saw something like that, there would have been a race among Senate staffers to get a bill into legislative language, you know, Sunday morning. And as far as I can tell so far, the Senate has been silent. You've come forward with yours, and you may have others in the House who'll be coming forward with some kind of amendment or bill to stop this. What is your proposal?
Yeah, well, thank you, Lawrence, and glad to be pen pals with you. I will tell you, I'm doing two things. I'm filing a standalone bill, which will be introduced tomorrow, our first day back in House session, and also attempting to amend the National Defense Authorization, which just happens to be coming up this week. My idea is to really use whatever legislative vehicle may be moving forward to make sure Congress makes clear this completely insane and dangerous idea never actually takes place.
Evelyn Farkas, the president apparently has backed off on this after getting criticism from Lindsey Graham, from others. Lindsey Graham saying it's not the worst idea in the world, but it's awfully close. And so apparently, the president is now saying it's not going to happen.
Right. I think he changed his mind pretty quickly, Lawrence, and I was also in the Senate, and I remember those days of running to try to be the first in line. So
Evelyn, you would have had this bill written by 10 a.m. Sunday morning, right?
I would have actually predicted that it needed to be written, potentially, even before the meeting between Putin and Trump. But unfortunately, I would say, I mean, first of all, it's ridiculous to imagine that we can cooperate with Russia. Back in the days when it was even impractical in 2013, actually President Obama tried to cooperate with Russia on cyber security. I was part of a working group. Actually, all we did was talk, and we ended up meeting with one of the highest-ranking intelligence officers in the Russian military to talk about cybersecurity. So we weren't going to get anywhere with the Russians then, and certainly after they attacked us, we weren't going to get anywhere. So I think he realized to say that we're going to cooperate with Russia, a lot of people have used the fox and the hen house analogy. I consulted with my friends. My friend Jim said it would be like the New England Patriots losing in the Super Bowl championship, losing 28-3, and they invite the Atlanta Falcons, the opposing team, into their huddle. So for you sports enthusiasts, it indicates to you, that we would be letting the Russians in if we had this level of cooperation that Trump's tweet seemed to indicate.
Congressman Boyle, you know what you're going to hear from the Republican committee chairman. You know what you're going to hear from Republican colleagues. We don't need this bill now. We don't need this amendment now because the president said he's not going to do it.
Well, right, like we can take the president's word because he's, of course, never reversed himself. And his word is clearly his bond, right? The fact of the matter is it is dangerous. The longer we go and we don't actually, by law, restrict the executive from doing something like this, we would be doing something dangerous and not in the national security. I'm heartened by the fact that there has been bipartisan pushback in the last 48 hours, but I urge my Republican colleagues to actually put country ahead of party and vote for this, much like the Russia sanctions bill passed the Senate. It's bogged down now in the House, but passed the Senate 98-2. That's the same sort of overwhelming vote that we should cast on this and make sure under no circumstances a week from now, a month from now, this Trump White House would actually put together this cybersecurity unit with the Russians.
Evelyn, quickly, I want to get your reaction to the breaking news of the night from the New York Times that that Donald Trump Jr. received an email saying that there was information from the Russian government that would be helpful to the Trump campaign, that they wanted to be helpful to the Trump campaign, and that was the basis for the meeting with this Russian lawyer that we've been reading about.
Right. I mean, that's pretty shocking, Lawrence. It doesn't surprise me, of course, because for those of us who have followed who the people were who, well, first of all, the woman who was meeting, the lawyer who was meeting with Donald Trump Jr., she has ties to the Kremlin, or certainly to the Russian government. What she's trying to do is in the interest of the Russian government to lift a whole nother set of sanctions from the ones that have been discussed a lot in the military, but from these sanctions based on human rights violations and the murder of Sergei Magnitsky. The other, of course, individual who's behind the scenes, the guy who brought her to the attention of Donald Trump, was the oligarch who's been, his father's been seen getting an award from President Putin. So it shouldn't be surprising that the source was Russian government. But once Donald Trump Jr. knew that, he should have known that he was going into really dangerous territory, because frankly speaking, getting a gift like this, whatever it is, whatever the information was, that could be considered a gift and a violation of campaign finance law.
Congressman Boyle, I want to get your reaction to the breaking news of the night that the Donald Trump Jr.'s meeting with Natalia Veselnitskaya, Russian lawyer, that it was arranged through an email that said to Donald Trump Jr., this will be information from the Russian government that will be helpful to your father's campaign, and the Russian government wants to be helpful.
You know, this story has been going on for, I mean, depending on when you put the start date, I would say roughly 7 months, ever since that night the New York Times reported, I believe it was late in December last year, that Flynn had the meetings that he had with senior levels of the Russian governments. For the 7 months or so that these stories have been dripping out, I do feel like this is actually the biggest shoe so far to drop, because now we have no question collusion and no question Trump's inner circle. In fact, his own son, and let's not forget, you also had Jared Kushner and Manafort in the same meeting right there in Trump Tower. Reince Priebus a couple days ago was calling this a quote-unquote nothing burger. I would like to see now what their attempt at an excuse may be, given this bombshell tonight.
Congressman Brendan Boyle, Evelyn Farkas, thank you both for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it.